So we know that the Federal Ethics Commissioner has launched an investigation into the, allegations that the PM's office had pressured the then Minister of Justice and Attorney General Jody Wilson-Raybould into helping SNC-Lavalin avoid criminal prosecution. They have been hiding behind this solicitor-client privilege. Can they say anything? Can the Prime Minister waive that? Can the then, Attorney General waive that? What can they do here?
So there's a lot of questions there. And I think the first thing we have to do is divide up when we say they, right? You're referencing they as both the Prime Minister, maybe the PMO, which is of course a broader office of the Prime Minister, and Jody Wilson-Raybould. They are not the same parties, and they're probably not on the same team and not wanting to do the same things. So when you talk about the interests of the Prime Minister, it certainly seems as if his interest is to maintain privilege. He has not waived that privilege, at least not explicitly so, which is a strong indication that he would much rather people not hear from Jody Wilson-Raybould. On the other hand, every indication from Ms. Wilson-Raybould herself is that she would love to talk if only she didn't feel bound by solicitor-client privilege. So she, as a lawyer, separate and apart from her role as a former cabinet minister, has a very critical ethical and professional responsibility to maintain confidence with her client. And she has no choice about that. It's not as if she wants to, she can blab or she can move along that way. She doesn't get to choose whether it's waived or not. The privilege doesn't belong to her. The responsibility is on her. The privilege belongs to the client, which of course raises a host of other questions. Who's the client? And that's a question a lot of people are asking. There are some obvious answers and some less obvious. The Prime Minister might well be the client, but the Prime Minister's office, which is a broader consortium of people, maybe they're the client, maybe Cabinet is the client, maybe all of the House of Commons, maybe, as some have suggested, all the people of Canada. And there are competing interests there, obviously. Leaving that aside, we've also got SNC-Lavalin, who of course is very much involved in this, is facing criminal prosecution now, and might well have an interest in saying, hang on a second, if you're having discussions about us in a solicitor-client communication,
we want to weigh in
too. We have privilege too, and we would rather that not get into the public sphere. So there's a whole hornet's nest of potential privileges here, and the only thing that's clear is that if you're Jody Wilson-Raybould and you're a lawyer, as she is, and always will be regardless of her resignation from Cabinet, you've got to be very, very careful or you're going to end up in hot water.
Jody Wilson-Raybould has a lawyer now.
She does. Not just any lawyer. She has a former Supreme Court of Canada justice.
What does that mean?
Well, that means she's being very careful in exactly the way that we talked just a moment ago. She's decided that clearly she has an interest in talking, and I think that interest in talking has expanded considerably. The more the Prime Minister suggests that he said certain things to Wilson-Raybould and she responded in certain ways, you can imagine that her sitting on her hands basically with her own hand clasped in front of her mouth becomes more and more awkward and uncomfortable. So she would like to respond to those allegations, but she wants to do it in a way that doesn't cause her problems with her own law society, that doesn't cause her problems with breaching privilege, that doesn't cause her problems with meddling or interfering with the SNC-Lavalin case, which is, of course, the central question of this whole affair and this whole scandal. So she's gone to a Supreme Court of Canada judge and has hired Justice Cromwell as a lawyer in the hopes that she's going to be able to get a clear answer about what she can say and what she can't say, and at least have some cover for her because she's lawyered up, gotten an opinion, and will then only follow the results of that opinion.
The Prime Minister said, Jody Wilson-Raybould confirmed to me in a conversation we had this fall where I told her directly that any decisions on matters involving the Director of Public Prosecutions were hers alone. One. Second, the Government of Canada did its job to the clear public standards expected of it. If anyone felt differently, they had an obligation to raise that with me. No one, including Jody, did that. Is this the Prime Minister absolving himself?
The impression the Prime Minister is trying to leave is a bit chaotic. The starting point seemed to have been, there weren't any of these conversations. There was no pressure. The initial response had been, we never had discussions like that resulted in any pressure. Then it was, well, if there were discussions like that, maybe Jody Wilson-Raybould felt pressured, but I certainly didn't provide pressure. And then we sort of had this further shift with the most recent statement from the Prime Minister, which seems to imply if she felt pressure, she didn't say anything to me about that pressure. Now, the problem with all of these comments is that, yes, the privilege belongs to the Prime Minister, it belongs to the client. But something is only privileged if you keep it privileged, if you keep it quiet, if you decide that you're going to tell anybody and everybody about it, there's a very strong argument that says you've waived privilege. It's not a secret if you're talking about it. And it, of course, puts Jody Wilson-Raybould in an extraordinarily difficult position when the client is prepared to tell everybody his side of the story, but at the same time send a clear message to her, don't tell your side of the story. And I have no doubt that that's one of the central issues that Justice Cromwell, on behalf of Jody Wilson-Raybould, is now examining in detail to see where does a client cross the line from asserting privilege to waiving it.